Hi everybody, it's Paul Harris with Global Recruiters of Blackhawk here in sunny California. How are you guys doing? I hope you're doing well. As you may know, I run an executive search firm that specializes in the telecom sector. Our specific niche, primary niche, is wireless infrastructure. And last week I went to a great trade show that I want to tell you about. In the next very few minutes I'm going to do my best to kind of get what's in my head, get it into your head. So if you were not able to make it, my goal is to make you feel like you were there and you got some meat and potatoes in terms of what happened in the meaty parts of the show. So here we go. So basically it's a small trade show that you may have heard of. It's called CTIA. So before you hit the eject button and say, Paul, why do I care if a guy manufactured a new leather case for an iPhone? I don't care. Well, guess what? I'm with you on that one. There was a whole bunch of stuff that happened in the wireless infrastructure world. It was actually the largest section on the trade show floor was called the Tower and Small Cell Pavilion. And there was another section that was actually breakout sessions that were upstairs, kind of more classroom style with great speakers. So at CTIA, the main event was, you know, Marcelo, Claure from Sprint talking, Glenn Lurie from AT&T Mobilitie was talking. Those were the main event speakers. And then on the Tower and Small Cell Summit, you got guys like Marc Ganzi from Digital Bridge and Dave Mayo from T-Mobile and Oliver Valente from ExteNet, etc. So a lot of great stuff regarding wireless infrastructure, and we'll get to that in just a second. Okay, I want to give you the highlights of their stuff as well. So here we go. So before actually CTIA started, I was fortunate enough to be invited to a breakfast sponsored by Raymond James. So these guys are basically telecom research company, analyst, investment banking, etc. A bunch of smart guys that have been in the business for years. Prentiss, Cawley, Uhrig, and Frank Louthan. They had a section called Chaos, Convergence, and Capacity. So let's start with chaos. So it's actually the opposite of what you think. It's not us in wireless infrastructure, we're falling apart and the sky is falling, we don't know what we're doing. It was actually the exact opposite. The chaos comes from the kind of the world in general. Obviously, China's stock market's going crazy, our stock market's up 300, down 400 the next day or whatever, it's crazy. And what they were saying is it's exactly the opposite for not only the tier 1 wireless carriers, but the tier 1 tower companies because they're on a recurring revenue model, right? Think about it. You make your phone calls on your cell phone, you write your check to your carrier, you send it in, it's the same amount every month. So they kind of know how much money they're going to be making on a, so for forecasting purposes, etc. It's a much smoother ride. Same thing with the tower companies. Think about it, they cut their deals with the tier 1 wireless carriers, the tower companies do, and it's a lease and it goes on for X amount of years and the same amount every month to rent their space on their towers, etc. So the recurring model, it doesn't give you this, right? It gives you kind of this. So that was what they were talking about. In addition, money just continuing to come from wireline to wireless, money's flowing into our sector. Interest rates are still low. Once again, more money flowing into the sector. And wireless is outperforming other sectors as well. And then basically what the speech was hey, the money is going to continue to come. It's got to come, right? I'm very clear. Like AT&T and Sprint were all waiting for them to do what they're doing, while T-Mobile and Verizon have been very steady. But their point was it has to come. The money from AT&T and Sprint is going to come, and it has to come. And I would totally believe that. Okay, the convergence was just a talk about the triple play, voice and data and video, etc. So nothing out of the ordinary there. But another one about capacity was all about small cells, right? Small cell and DAS. So at PCIA 2012, so it was over 3 years ago, I was sitting in the front row, and when someone from AT&T said, hey, we're going to build next year, it will be 2014, we're going to build 40,000 cell sites. 10 of them are going to be macro, and 30,000 of them in 1 year are going to be small cells. Well, fast forward to 3 years from there, and what has happened? 30,000 cells? No. Small cells, they have built 7. And we know why. And the guys from Raymond James talked about it. Basically, it's 4 to 8 times more expensive to build a small cell than it is to build a macro cell, and that's probably site acquisition and zoning being 75% of those costs. They also talked about how Verizon has 10 to 15,000 fewer macro cell sites than AT&T, but they're saying, hey, they're absolutely fine with it because, as you know, they've been leading the way in DAS and small cell with the help of Crown Castle, etc. So they're going to be just fine. AT&T has a ton of spectrum, and they're going to build more macro cell sites as well. All right, I want to spend a little time. So that was the Raymond James. Great job by those guys, and it was a very interesting, very interesting. They also talked a little bit about Latin America and what's going on. I want to spend a little bit of time with that. I'm sure you guys know, right? I mean, LATAM is 5 years approximately behind where we are in the U.S., right? A lot of 2G, a lot of 3G, etc. And so we know what's going to happen then. We've seen that movie before. We know how it ends. They're going to be building a ton of stuff. Let me give you a figure that they gave me that absolutely shocked me. I did not know this. So in the United States, there's about 1,000 subscribers per cell site. 1,000 subscribers per cell site in the United States. In Latin America and Mexico, it's about 7,000 subscribers per cell site. So do you think there's a little pent-up demand there? Do you think that they're going to have to build out their system? Absolutely yes. And there's a lot of companies that are investing into Mexico, Latin America, American Tower, SBA, Digital Bridge, not so much Crown Castle. And they also talked about what Sprint's plans are for small cells. This is under the capacity program that they were talking about. Obviously, they're planning on building 70,000 cells, small cells, right? Some people are skeptical. One of the speakers pointed out that Japan, obviously Masayoshi-san from Sprint, smart guy, obviously knows what he's doing, very, very successful in Japan. But they also pointed out that from a geographical perspective, the entire country of Japan could fit inside of California. So is there skepticism about how that's going to go with building that out for the United States? We'll see what happens. There was also talk about how dominated one entity is in Mexico. So Carlos Slim owns about 70% of that market. AT&T now, with buying USCel and Nextel Mexico, only owns about 10%. So, and the juxtaposition of that was in Brazil, it's a lot more evenly spaced. So, for example, for Tier 1 wireless carriers times 25% versus Carlos Slim owning 70% of Mexico. So, very, very interesting statistics for me. Let me switch you guys from the Raymond James section to the opening speech at CTIA. It was done by the president of CTIA, Meredeth Attwell Baker. She talked about how the next revolution, so the first revolution, obviously the internet, next revolution that's going to be just as big is IoT, right? Internet of Things, and how the demands on wireless infrastructure are going to grow like crazy, how data usage is expected to go 6x by 2020. And what she was saying is, we know what we need to do here at CTIA. We need to help you guys get more spectrum, and that's the #1 thing that she and the good folks at CTIA are trying to do. So thank you so much to Meredith and then her co-workers as well. Tom Wheeler, FCC chairman, got up there and he basically, his big deal was talking about the 600 megahertz auction, and some people are saying it's going to be delayed, and what he's saying is, I got a bulletin for you, it's not going to be delayed. 600 megahertz auction, going to happen in March of 2016. Okay, so let me get to the Tower and Small Cell Summit. Once again, separate section, upstairs, breakout rooms, kind of classroom style. Led last year by a guy named Berge Ayvazian from Wireless 2020, did a phenomenal job last year, did an even better job this year. He talked about some statistics. There's about 150,000 towers in the United States, 150,000 towers in the United States. About 100 of them, 2/3 are owned by the American Tower, Crown Castle, SBA, US Cellulars of the world. And then 50,000, 1/3, are owned by the Tier 1 wireless carriers, AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile. Talked about towers expanding into Mexico and LATAM, which I just talked about. And then he talked about, big news, SBA exiting the DAS space by divesting in ExteNet. And then, of course, Marc Ganzi from Digital Bridge picking up those assets from ExteNet. So speaking of Marc Ganzi, he was one of the keynote speakers at the Tower and Small Cell Summit, And I think we all figured out why he gets asked to speak at so many of these things, because he does a phenomenal job. He's really good up there, gets up there, knowing Marc probably no sleep as well, and he just crushes these speeches. He's just got so much passion about the industry, and he's got great advice for some people. I'm going to try to get that advice that he gave to us, give that to you guys here. So what he talked about, how the RFPs used to be very straightforward. I'm giving you an RFP for this many macro sites. You've seen it a million times. Just go do it. Just go bid on it, etc. And what he's saying is, it's much with the advent of the HETnet, right, heterogeneous network. The RFPs are much more complicated now, and so his advice to the vendors were basically, hey vendors, you can no longer be a one-trick pony. You got to be able to do it all if you want to respond to these RFPs. He also talked about, you can tell he's such a huge fan of the macro model and how it's still great, and there's still a ton being built, and there's 6 to 12% growth coming in that. Small cells, there's about 63,000 small cells now, and there's with a 35% CAGR, right, the compounded annual growth rate over the next 5 years. He talked about SDN and NFV and how there used to be there's the RAN, there's the core, and they're kind of separate. You got to join them together, of course, but they're kind of separate. But with SDN and NFV, it's going to be more of a networking business. So the background experience, skill set, contacts, technical abilities, etc., are going to need to be changed for people to be in that world. Once again, the macro system is still the backbone of the network. And then the quote, I wrote it down, and he basically said, hey everybody, billions with a B, billions of dollars in investment is coming into the market. And I'll talk about that a little bit later in the tower roundtable, I guess it was called. So anyways, other things that I just made note of, I want to get across to you guys. So that was the end of Marc Ganzi's speech. Great job as always. Other stuff, other speakers, I can't name them all, but basically, a lot of talk about LTEA, LTEU, a lot of talk about SON, a lot of talk about the fact that while we were there, I think Verizon had announced that they were going to be doing 5G trials next year, still planning on launching in 2020 or maybe 2017. We'll see what happens. And then small cells should be reaching full deployment by 2H of 2016, so the second half of 2016. So we're kind of where we're at right now. Small cell DAS should be in full implementation. So I know we'll all be waiting for that. It should be a good time. What else we talked about? So I told about the tower, tower roundtable, whatever. All the guys from the tower companies. I love those roundtables. Those are a bunch of great guys. And one of the quotes was from Ron Bizick from Tarpon Towers, and he has talked about. I've heard him talk about it before. He was saying that everyone's been living off of T-Mobile and Verizon over the past 6, 12, 18 months, whatever, and how that the perfect storm, as he calls it, is coming. It's not here yet, but it is coming. And his definition of the perfect storm is all the tier all 4 of the tier 1 wireless carriers spending all the same time. We've seen it before. It's AT&T and Sprint have kind of been asleep. We get it, but I think that T-Mobile's going to keep going what they're doing. Verizon's going to keep going doing what they're doing. Very steady build outs. AT&T will turn the water on, and Sprint will turn the water on. It's going to be a wonderful time. So that was Ron. Lance Cawley from InSite, I think he's a CFO of InSite Wireless. He called this AT&T thing a short-term blip, and it will come, the spending will come back potentially after the 600 megahertz auction. And think about it, right? You guys, AT&T's been spending a truckload of money, right? $48.5 billion for DirecTV, $18 billion for the AWS 3 auction, another $4 billion for Usacell and Nextel Mexico, and then another $3 billion to invest in China, kind of getting the system up there in Mexico. They're spending a lot of money, so it's not like they're forgot about us or anything. They're still doing a great job. They just have been a little quiet on the building out front, and obviously that's going to change. Just 2 more real quick I want to talk about. So back away from the Small Cell Summit over to the CTIA main stage, and there was one of the best moments of the time. Glenn Lurie, president of AT&T Mobility, absolutely crushed his speech, man. I mean, that guy, what a dynamo. I don't know if you've ever seen that guy speak, but man, you could plug a socket into him and he'd light Vegas for a week on what he gave from the speech. So basically what he was talking about was the connected world. He talked about in 1985 there was about 340 connected devices, and now there's over 340 million connected devices. So he's talking about what's coming, what's next. In a nutshell, basically three things. Mobile video, we got that, right? Anytime, anywhere, mobile video. Number two was the connected home, smart home, security, automation, etc. And number three was what we all know, IoT, right? Connected devices, connected cars. Is going to eat up a ton of bandwidth on the wireless infrastructure system. That's why we need to build it out. And he talked about the fact that AT&T is the clear leader. About over 50% of the connected cars that are on the market today are with AT&T. So they're definitely taking a lead on that. Last one I want to talk about, Marcelo. We're all waiting for him. And basically he said, hey, you guys, we got a ton of spectrum. We're in a great spectrum position. We are going to have the largest small cell build out in the next 2 years as anyone has ever seen. They did a trial in Denver, I believe it was, and they said, hey, we tied, I think, with Verizon for the best system there. And he said, within the next 2 years, there's the quote, something like this, in the next 2 years, all of our system is going to have the same, it's going to mirror what's happening in Denver. It's going to be a phenomenal system. So anyways, that was it, you guys. It was a great show. Once again, CTIA, highly recommend, especially the Tower and Small Cell Summit and Pavilion. And that's it. I will talk to you guys next time. I think my next for me is the ExteNet Expo. Yeah, ExteNet Expo. It's the end of October in Southern California. I'll be there, and then I'll report to you after that. You guys, I appreciate your time. I hope that was helpful. Hopefully you learned something, and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Have a great day.